There are people who enter our lives not to bring light, but to cast shadows. They don't need harsh words or raised voice. Their mere presence unsettles us, and if we're not grounded, we risk losing ourselves just to cope with them. So how do we preserve inner peace in a world full of noise? How do we stay free from negative emotions, yet remain both kind and strong? Marcus Aurelius, Roman emperor and one of the great Stoic minds, faced betrayal, deceit, and schemes daily, yet met it all with equanimity. This video is your reminder. You don't have to fight for peace. You only need the wisdom not to lose it. And here are 11 intelligent ways to do just that. 1. Know clearly whether you're reacting or choosing. There is a vast, yet often overlooked difference between reacting and choosing. And in our most trying moments, that difference is what separates those ruled by emotion from those who command themselves. When someone insults us, mocks us, or acts in a way that wounds us, our first instinct is to react with anger, justification, retaliation, or even withdrawal. But if we pause, just for a breath, and turn inward instead of outward, we'll realize something. We have a choice, and that's where true power begins. Marcus Aurelius once reminded us, if something disturbs you, it is not the thing itself, but your judgment of it. This isn't a rebuke. It's a reclaiming of power. We cannot control what others do, but we can always control how we respond. When others act poorly, it says nothing about us until we respond. It is our response that shapes our character, and in that sense, we reveal whether we live by our principles or are dragged around by our impulses. Picture this. You're in a crowd, and someone publicly insults you. One part of you flares up, eager to retaliate, to save face. But another part, a deeper, quieter one, whispers, breathe, don't react, choose. Choosing doesn't mean submitting. It could mean silence. It could mean a firm, clear statement. It could mean walking away. Any act born of awareness, rather than impulse, is an act of mastery. And when we are masters, we're no longer victims. We become the ones who decide. To do this, we must train a new habit. Observe before acting. When an emotion rises, anger, disappointment, sorrow, ask yourself, where is this coming from? What is it telling me about myself? Don't ask, why did they do that to me? Ask, why did I react that way? What part of me was touched? It might be an old wound, a fear of being disrespected, a struggling ego. When you understand the roots, you stop being swept away. You begin to see the space between stimulus and response. And in that space, freedom is born. Recognizing reaction is a form of self-education. To the Stoics, life doesn't happen to us. It presents itself for us as mining. When someone behaves badly, they see it as a chance to practice calm. When emotion arises, use it to look deeper within. Resilience isn't born from willpower alone. It is built through countless moments of choosing response over reaction until it becomes second nature. And then, something remarkable happens. Those who once had power over your peace no longer do, because you've severed the emotional cord that linked them to you, and in its place, you stand steady, unmoved, like a pillar in a storm. Reaction is instinct. Choice is maturity. When we begin to live consciously with our emotions, we stop being puppets of the world. We become the authors of our own script, and you'll come to see, peace doesn't come from controlling others, but from no longer letting others control you. 2. Forgiveness, not to excuse, but to set yourself free. Forgiveness is one of the hardest acts we face in this life, especially when the other person shows no remorse, offers no apology, and continues to cause harm. Human instinct clings to pain, to protect, to remember, to avoid being hurt again. But the paradox is this: by holding on to the wound, we trap ourselves in an endless loop of suffering. The Stoics understood this well. To them, forgiveness isn't about pleasing others or denying what happened. It's a radical act of wisdom, because it's the only way to free ourselves from the invisible grip of those who've hurt us. Imagine your mind as a room. Every resentment, every betrayal, every muscle memory is a heavy object taking up space. The more you keep, the more crowded it becomes, and the harder it is for light to enter. Forgiveness is when you open a window, clear out the rot, and make room for peace to return. The one who hurt you doesn't have to disappear from your life, but you have the right to reclaim emotional freedom from them. Forgiveness is telling yourself, I refuse to let that person live in my mind rent-free. You're not excusing their behavior. You're giving yourself permission to move forward without the weight. Stoic philosophy never asks us to pretend or ignore what happened. On the contrary, it values remembering, to learn, to grow, but not to be imprisoned. Forgiveness guided by wisdom means we remember enough to not repeat the past, but not so bitterly that we let it shape the rest of our future. Marcus Aurelius once wrote in his journal, "The wrongdoer is not evil by nature. They act according to what their understanding allows." When we see things from that lens, we shift from victim to observer, from emotion to reason, from reaction to conscious choice. Forgiveness does not mean maintaining ties with those who've harmed us. In fact, it becomes even more essential when we choose to walk away. Without forgiveness, the emotional cord still binds us, no matter how cold we appear or how sharply we cut ties. Forgiveness is the final act that severs the cord without hatred. Hatred keeps them alive inside us in a toxic form. Forgiveness shows them out, quietly, peacefully. No drama, just a quiet decision. I choose freedom. In the journey of practicing Stoicism, forgiveness is one of the deepest lessons in self-mastery. It shows that we are not driven by revenge, not ruled by emotion, and not pulled into invisible wars by others. Strength isn't in how quickly we strike back, but in the inner force that allows us to pause, reflect, release, and move forward in peace. Forgiveness doesn't make you weak. It proves you no longer rely on someone else's behavior to define your worth. And in that moment of choosing to forgive, you reaffirm, I am the master of my own mind, no one else. 3. Hold steady, like a mountain in the storm. Emotional steadiness doesn't mean feeling nothing. It means not letting emotions pull you away from what matters most. It is the ability to remain still in the storm, unmoved by the winds, unshaken by thunder. The Stoics didn't reject emotion. They acknowledged it as a natural part of being human, but they believed emotion is something to be observed, not obeyed. When someone treats you poorly, insults you, betrays you, or attacks you with negativity, your instincts scream to react with anger, hurt, or retaliation. But in that very moment, you have a choice to be led by emotion or to lead it. To hold steady is to be like a mountain, pause, silent, unshaken by the storm outside. The mountain doesn't try to escape the storm. It endures, and when it passes, the mountain remains. The Stoics does the same. They don't run from emotion, but they don't hand it the reins. They learn to stand watch over their inner life like a sentinel at the gate, deciding what gets in and what stays out. Anger is not the enemy, but if you welcome it in and let it sit on the throne, it will rule every decision and turn you into its subject. A mind led by emotion is like a rudderless boat on the open sea, pushed by every current, dashed against yeasts, and ultimately lost. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Calm is strength from within. It does not depend on the outside world, but arises from knowing yourself. When you know who you are, When you are clear on what truly matters, you are not easily swayed by insults or the chaos of others. Emotional steadiness isn't numbness. It's the ability to feel deeply without reacting impulsively. When someone wounds you, pause and ask, are they speaking to me or revealing their own inner turmoil? Many throw stones because they haven't yet learned to heal. And when you understand this, you grow quieter, not from weakness, but because you are strong enough not to strike back. We can't stop others from being careless, but we can always choose how we respond. And every time you respond with calm instead of impulse, you add another stone to the foundation of inner mastery. It's not something built overnight. It's the result of persistent training, like an artist refining a sculpture, or a fighter repeating a motion until it becomes second nature. Every time you remain composed in a situation that once unraveled you, that's a victory, a key victory, a deep one. No applause, but you'll know you overcame yourself. The Stoics believed emotions are like passing clouds. They may block the light, but they never change the nature of the sky. You are that sky, and every time you stand firm in emotional cases, you live in alignment with your highest self. What true self-mastery aims toward? Emotional steadiness doesn't mean permanent peace. It means the ability to return to peace swiftly whenever storms arise. And when you master that, you don't just shield yourself from outer chaos. You become a refuge for others who've lost their way. 4. Boundaries are the mark of self-respect. In a world where everyone wants to speak, interrupt, and exert control over your thoughts, feelings, and time, setting personal boundaries is no longer optional. It's a spiritual act of survival. Boundaries aren't walls to push others away. They are maps that mark where we end and where others begin. The Stoics understood that a self-respecting person does not let others define them, nor grant entry into their inner life without permission. Marcus Aurelius lived in a court full of schemes and flattery. He didn't isolate himself from the world, but he built an invisible fortress, one no one could breach unless he opened the gate. That's what boundaries are, the conscious choice of who may enter your emotional space and who may not. We often confuse kindness with weakness, tolerance with allowing others to hurt us repeatedly. But real kindness must be paired with clarity. A person with boundaries isn't rigid. They simply know what matters, what must be protected, and what is non-negotiable. Boundaries are how we tell the world, I respect myself, and if you wish to remain in my life, you must do the same. It's a quiet yet powerful declaration. I will not let anyone treat my peace as if it's theirs to take. And every time you uphold a boundary, you reinforce self-respect, not through shouting or conflict, but through consistent action and demeanor. Setting boundaries may lead to being misunderstood, criticized, or even distanced by those who were used to crossing your lines. But that loss is necessary. Anyone who demands you compromise your values to maintain a relationship is not truly there for you. They are there for the benefits you offered when you didn't yet protect yourself. That's why the Stoics never built their inner lives on external approval. They sought not the crowd's validation, but harmony within. Boundaries reflect that alignment. The clearer they are, the less likely you are to be hurt by what doesn't deserve your pain. Picture yourself as the gatekeeper of an ancient city. Not everyone gets to pass just because they smile or say something sweet. Some must stay outside. Some relationships must be kept at a safe distance. And in some situations, you must turn away, not from hatred, but because you've learned to guard yourself through respect. Without boundaries, we become cities without walls, open to intrusion, disorder, and ultimately, the loss of identity and peace. Boundaries are also where true compassion is practiced, because only when you are not drowning in others' emotions and expectations can you fully show up with love and help that doesn't come at the cost of your own well-being. The Stoics never advocated coldness, but they knew that love and kindness only have meaning when they come from a strong and sovereign soul. And that's only possible when your boundaries are firm. Be soft in your words, but firm in your limits. Be kind to others, but never so kind that you abandon the respect you owe yourself. Boundaries aren't against others. They are for yourself. They are spiritual landmarks that keep you centered amid the pull of expectations, opinions, and demands. And when you rise to defend your boundaries, you are telling the world, I am a person of worth, and I have the courage to protect that worth. 5. Guard your mental energy like a flame in the night. Mental energy is one of the most precious assets we possess, yet we often waste it without realizing it. We spend hours justifying ourselves to people who don't care to understand, grow irritated by meaningless remarks, or get drawn into conversations that add no real value to our inner life. Each time this happens, our inner flame, the one that fuels our strength, focus, and will to live, is dimmed just a little more. Preserving mental energy, then, isn't a theoretical suggestion. It's a vital practice for anyone seeking depth and self-mastery. In Stoic philosophy, it's about being awake in every moment, refusing to trade inner peace for unworthy interactions. Imagine you are carrying a candle through the night. Around you, wind, dust, and sudden movement arise from others' words, actions, and attitudes. If you don't shield the flame, if you don't walk mindfully, it will go out. And when it's out, you can no longer see your way. Emotions become chaotic. Your mind scatters, and poor decisions follow. This is what happens when we fail to protect our mental energy. It doesn't just exhaust us. It disorients our life. The Stoics never let others decide what was worthy of occupying their minds. They chose their responses with care, as if selecting each brick to build the temple of peace. You don't need to answer every question, attend every conversation, or participate in every conflict. Every time you choose silence over argument, every time you walk away from an endless debate, you save a piece of yourself for what truly matters. And just as a warrior doesn't draw their sword unless it's necessary, we too must learn to reserve our attention, presence, and emotion for what's worthy. The Stoic doesn't live cold or detached. They simply refuse to burn themselves out on things that hold no moral or spiritual value. They know that each outburst, each quarrel, each moment of lost composure is a piece of energy that could have been used to nourish their soul instead. Ask yourself, who claimed space in your mind today that didn't deserve it? Are you replaying a conversation just to wound yourself again? Are you carrying someone's careless words as if they were truth? If so, then you're letting them live in your head, rent-free. The Stoics offered no such luxury. They understood that attention is the first currency of self-mastery, and so they lived by a clear rule. If it doesn't bring peace, growth, or truth, it doesn't deserve my time or mind. Protecting mental energy doesn't mean closing off or shrinking back. It is a continuous awareness of what you're giving, what you're receiving, and whether that exchange is truly worth it. Like a sacred flame meant to light only what matters, your mental energy should be reserved for people, pursuits, and purposes that carry meaning. No one can live peacefully while burdened by a dozen pointless obligations each day. Learn to keep your inner fire lit, not letting it be snuffed out by every passing gust. Because once you protect that flame, you don't just preserve yourself, you become a light for others lost in the dark. 6. Focus on your purpose, not the noise around you. The modern world doesn't lack voices, it lacks clarity of direction. Every day we're surrounded by a flood of noise, criticism, unsolicited advice, comparisons, others' expectations, and whispers of doubt. That noise seeps into our minds through judgmental glances, passing comments, social media scrolls, even the silent disapproval of those we thought were close. Without a clear destination, we are easily swept into the spiral, waking one day to realize we've gone far without knowing where we're headed. Stoicism doesn't just teach emotional control. It insists that a rational person knows what is worth pursuing, no matter how loud the world becomes. Focusing on your purpose isn't just a matter of productivity. It's a matter of dignity. It's the deliberate act of deciding what is worthy of your attention, time, and energy. Marcus Aurelius reminded us that anything not aligned with reason and virtue is not worth holding on to. In a world obsessed with appearance, the Stoic is unmoved by shallow successes. They don't strive to prove themselves, don't live to please others, and don't waste energy debating with those heading in a different direction. They move quietly, persistently, and resolutely. They walk their chosen path without stopping for every voice shouting from the sidelines. That is the strength that comes from within, a power that doesn't need applause to keep moving forward. We must understand that every goal comes with obstacles, but most people don't quit because the path is too hard. They quit because they spend too much time listening to others instead of listening to themselves. One careless comment can knock you off course if you aren't clear on what you're aiming for. One sarcastic remark can make you want to quit if you give weight to the opinions of those who don't understand your path. But when your purpose is clear, when you have a reason strong enough to wake up each morning, something that makes your heart race, then the noise loses its power. It fades into the background, and you become the melody. You don't need to silence the world. You just stop letting it lead. Focusing on your goal is also an act of self-mastery. It demands that you say no to empty conversations, to relationships that drain your spirit, to cheap praise and fleeting admiration. Focus doesn't come from outer discipline. It comes from a deep commitment to something greater than yourself. When you live for something meaningful, you don't need reminders to show up. You don't need supervision to stay aligned, because you're no longer chasing rewards from the outside. You're simply living in accordance with what's within. And here's the truth: no one can stay focused forever without remembering why they started. That's why Stoics take time each day to ask, am I living in line with my purpose? Am I letting the trivial pull me off course? Am I listening to the voice of my soul, or being led by the clamor of the world? They journal, they reflect, they recalibrate, and in doing so, they live without regret, not lost in the noise, not derailed by gossip, but faithful to the path that matters most. 7. Seek support from those who share your energy. There's a truth we often avoid facing. No one stays strong forever in solitude, no matter how disciplined or wise you are. If you're surrounded by people who plant doubt, spread fear, stir insecurity, and pull you away from your values, you'll slowly be worn down without noticing. In Stoic philosophy, self-mastery is essential, but that doesn't mean living as an island, cut off from the world. The Stoics understood that to stay awake, to remain grounded amidst chaos and negativity, we need companions. Not necessarily those who rescue us from the storm, but those who remind us to steady the wheel when the road disappears. Finding someone who resonates at your level of energy is like finding a mirror that reflects your highest self. They don't sugarcoat or soften your flaws, but they help you see your path more clearly, without distortion from judgment or envy. These are the people who, when you speak of your purpose, don't smirk, don't doubt, and don't tell you to be more realistic. They simply place a hand on your shoulder and say, I get it. and I'm here if you need me. In a world obsessed with competition and comparison, having someone who doesn't compete but uplifts, even silently, is a rare gift. The Stoic doesn't seek crowds. They seek resonance, because they know one aligned person can take you farther than 100 loud ones who don't understand you. True support isn't solving your problems. It's reminding you that you're capable of solving them yourself. It's the person who, when you're hurting, doesn't say, "Cheer up, it'll be fine," but asks, "What have you learned from this pain?" It's someone who doesn't push you to go faster, but helps you pause before you burn out. Seeking support doesn't make you weak. It makes you wise. Only those who know their limits also know when to ask for a new perspective, a thoughtful question, or simply a non-judgmental ear. We're not machines. We can't always stay sharp alone. Sometimes a single conversation with the right person is enough to carry you through the darkness without falling. And this support doesn't have to come from someone close or present every day. It can come from a book, a speech, a values-driven community, a space where you're not judged, not dragged down, but inspired to keep living true to what you believe. In a world full of loud but hollow voices, seek the quiet ones who carry depth. In a digital space full of false glow, seek honest souls where you can be yourself without a mask. Because on the Stoic path, the right kind of support can be the line between breaking down in isolation and rising stronger through understanding. Cultivate those connections, not just as support, but as reminders of who you are each time you lose your way. 8. Mastering your inner voice, ally or saboteur. Of all the noise we face each day, there is one voice we can't mute, can't escape, and can't ignore. It's the voice inside our own mind. It's the silent but constant dialogue in our heads, the self-talk, the questions, the judgments, and the conclusions we often accept without ever challenging. The question isn't whether this voice exists, it's whether it's acting as a trusted ally pushing us forward, or a quiet saboteur holding us back. The Stoics understood that how we speak to ourselves matters far more than what others say. Others are around for a few hours a day, but we live with ourselves every hour for a lifetime. And if we don't master that voice, even the world's applause will feel empty, and the smallest shift can shake us to the core. The negative inner voice rarely comes from truth. It often stems from memories, fears, old wounds, and distorted beliefs. It whispers things like, "I'm not good enough. I'll probably fail again. People are judging me. No one really needs me." Sound familiar? The danger is, these thoughts repeat so often that we begin to treat them as facts. But in Stoic thought, truth doesn't come from repetition. It comes from withstanding scrutiny. That's why Stoics don't just listen to their inner voice. They interrogate it, observe it, and refuse to let it lead if it doesn't serve growth or inner peace. They learn to step outside their thoughts, as if standing on a riverbank watching the current, not resisting it, not following it, just aware and choosing how to respond. To master your inner voice is to learn to speak to yourself the way you'd speak to a true friend, with honesty, compassion, and responsibility. When you fail, instead of saying, "I'm terrible at this," say, "I'm learning how to do better next time." When someone rejects you, don't tell yourself, "I must not be worth anything," but rather, "This wasn't the right fit for me right now, but I still have value, and I keep moving forward." These small shifts, repeated over time, build real inner strength. Stoics don't wait for life to be easy to stay calm. They practice steadiness in how they speak to themselves, even when the world seems to push back. We can't stop negative thoughts from arising, but we can choose not to feed them. Every time you let your inner critic run wild without challenge, you give it more power. But every time you pause, observe, and ask, "Is this even true?" What proof do I have for this thought? You reclaim authority over your mind, and when you begin to master your internal dialogue, something powerful happens. You grow more confident, more focused, more grounded, not because others treat you better, but because you've stopped mistreating yourself. On the Stoic path, your inner voice isn't just a container of beliefs, it's the engine of your will, and like any powerful tool, if you don't take control of it, it will control you. Remember this, the world can be harsh, but if you have a friend inside, not an enemy, you can withstand anything. Become the companion you've always needed, starting with the words you whisper to yourself each day. 9. A solution-oriented mindset. Don't get stuck in complaints. There's a subtle trap many of us fall into, the reflexive habit of complaining. Whenever life doesn't go our way, we grumble about the weather, about people, about work, about pressure, about things beyond our control, and then use those very things to justify our inaction, our stagnation, our refusal to take responsibility. Complaining is like shouting at the sky in the middle of a storm, hoping it will stop the clouds from moving. It doesn't just fail, it drains your vitality. The Stoics didn't deny that life is unjust, that people can be difficult, or that circumstances can be painful. But they knew that focusing solely on the problem is like sitting in the mud without looking for a way out. So instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" they ask, "What can I do with what's happening now?" A solution-oriented mindset is the ability to shift from being a victim to becoming an agent. It's not fake positivity, nor is it emotional denial. It's the next step after acknowledging the pain. The Stoics taught that emotions are data, not destiny. When you're angry, it doesn't mean you must act harshly. When you are sad, it doesn't mean you must stop moving. Emotions are like warning lights. They alert you that something's off. But whether you stay parked there or move forward is your choice. The one who learns to shift from complaint to action is someone cultivating true inner strength, because in any situation, there is always something within your control. Your perspective, your response, or your next move. Complaining traps your mind in the past, in what's already happened and can't be changed. A solution-oriented mindset brings you back to the present, where you still have the power to decide, to adjust, to begin again if needed. It requires humility to accept what you can't control, but also strength to believe you can change your approach. An unpleasant boss doesn't have to be the reason you abandon your values. It might be a signal that you need to upgrade your communication or reinforce your boundaries. A broken relationship doesn't always need to end, but if all you do is complain about it without taking action to repair it, you're complicit in its continued unraveling. A solution-focused mindset is also how the Stoics embodied courage. They didn't wait for inspiration, perfect timing, or external permission. They saw challenges as exercises, each problem as a puzzle, not a sentence. And when you begin to view life as a series of lessons waiting to be decoded, you'll find yourself complaining less and growing more curious about how to overcome. This mindset doesn't eliminate hardship, but it strips hardship of its power to intimidate. Because you know, each time you rise, you're not just getting closer to your goals, you're becoming a wiser version of yourself. And finally, the most powerful part of a solution-oriented mindset is that it inspires. When you stop being the person who only points out problems and start becoming the one who works to solve them, you naturally become a pillar for others. You don't have to preach or persuade. Your life becomes the message. Things can change as long as we choose to change ourselves first. That's how the Stoics lived. They didn't complain, didn't blame, didn't broadcast their pain. They acted. They adapted. They advanced. And if we want a life not dictated by circumstances, then the solution-first mindset is where we begin. 10. Knowing when to stay silent. Not every battle is worth fighting. Some battles only exist because we choose to engage. Some arguments only continue because we choose to respond. And some conflicts dissolve on their own if we're calm enough to remain silent at the right moment. Silence to many may appear as weakness, a lack of courage, a sign of surrender. But in the Stoic inner world, silence is an art form, a clear expression of self-control and maturity. People often think victory comes through clever comebacks, sharp reasoning, or teaching someone a lesson. But what truly needs protecting isn't the ego, it's inner peace. Because some battles, while winnable in argument, are lost internally the moment we let emotion take the reins over reason. The Stoics understood that not everyone is worthy of your response, because every time you speak, every time you argue with you're giving away a part of your energy, drawing from a mental reserve that should be preserved for things of real value. Silence doesn't mean condoning or ignoring. It's a deliberate filter. Will this response lead to something meaningful, or only add fuel to the fire? Will these words help the other person grow, or just make them more defensive? And more importantly, does this truly affect my core values, or just bruise my pride? When you ask these questions, you'll find that most of our daily disputes are entirely unnecessary. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You always have the option of having no opinion." That simple sentence is one of the highest forms of intellectual freedom, because when you stop feeling obligated to react to everything you disagree with, you reclaim your mental autonomy, no longer letting others dictate your emotions or responses. Silence isn't the absence of something to say away. It's the clarity to know that saying it won't change anything except draining your time and energy. Silence isn't surrender. It's a quiet triumph of guarding your mind from those who don't deserve entry. Sometimes silence is the highest form of rejection, the most powerful message you can send without saying a word. Because when someone expects a reaction, your silence forces them to confront themselves, to sit with a space they can't fill with your anger. Stoics choose silence not because they don't care, but because they refuse to give emotional power to what is meaningless. They know every word has weight, and they won't spend it on battles that only exist to feed mutual egos. Knowing when to stay silent is a mark of a strong mind. It demands you override the reflex to retaliate, resist the urge to prove you are right, and accept that truth doesn't need to be shouted to exist. You don't need an opinion on everything. Don't need to engage in every debate. Don't need to explain yourself to be understood. Because if someone truly seeks understanding, they will listen in silence. And if they only want to win, then nothing you say will matter. On the path of Stoic discipline, you'll find that the more you grow, the less you react, the more selective you become with your mental energy. Because in the end, calm is the loudest voice you can use to declare your worth. No words, no arguments, just strength that speaks from within. 11. Seeing through false kindness. Don't be fooled by appearances. Not every smile is sincere. Not every handshake carries goodwill. And not every compliment comes from genuine admiration. As we walk through life, and especially when we begin cultivating stillness, awareness, and self-mastery in the Stoic tradition, we come to recognize a subtler threat than open hostility. Those who wear kindness as a mask to hide self-interest, envy, control, or manipulation. They don't wound with harsh words, but with excessive sweetness, calculated concern, and false closeness. that lowers our guard. That's why a Stoic doesn't just observe appearances. They examine motives. They don't just listen to what is said. They listen for what's left unsaid, because truth often hides in what people try hardest to conceal, not in what they put on display. Marcus Aurelius once reminded us, "You see a person's true character in what they do repeatedly, not in what they say when they want to be liked." That quote serves as a warning to anyone who's been hurt by counterfeit kindness, the kind that wears a carefully designed mask to gain approval. But behind it lies intent no one would see if judging only by a first impression. Stoics are not cynical, but they are cautious. They don't rush to judgment, but they take note. They don't get swept up by surface-level positivity, because they know emotions can be manipulated. And sweetness is often the most effective tool to disarm those who crave external validation. To see through false kindness, you must train a kind of bias-free observation. The Stoics valued as clear-sighted intuition. It doesn't stem from coldness, but from inner honesty. When you no longer seek to be liked, you won't be swayed by flattery. When your self-worth doesn't depend on others' approval, it becomes easier to distinguish real connection from clever infiltration. Genuine kindness doesn't perform. It is patient, quiet, and consistent. Someone who is kind to you today, but mocks you tomorrow when you offer no benefit, was never sincere. And if you keep questioning someone's motives, chances are you already have your answer. The Stoics taught that clarity is more important than comfort, because truth may hurt once, but deception hurts over time. When someone always shows up at the perfect moment, agrees with everything you say, or praises you without reason, pay closer attention. They may not care about you. They may only be managing how you see them for their own agenda. And when that agenda shifts, so will their loyalty. The goal isn't to distrust everyone, but to build an inner steadiness that doesn't collapse every time a relationship breaks because you placed your trust in the wrong hands. Stoics don't resent those who pretend to care, nor do they stay wounded for long. They know deception doesn't redefine their worth. It simply reveals a lesson waiting to be learned. They honor truth, even when it isolates, because solitude in integrity is better than belonging to a crowd that won't let you be yourself. And they know when it's time to walk away from kindness that no longer feels real. Not with drama, not with noise, but with a quiet retreat to protect their peace. I wasn't born with calmness, nor am I someone who easily lets go of pain or always responds rationally when disappointed. I, too, have reacted impulsively, argued just to prove I was right, and exhausted myself trying to fight toxic people around me without knowing where to draw the line for myself, until I realized the point isn't to change the world or fix others, but to change how I live with myself each day. I started small, journaling in the morning to recognize my emotions before the day begins, spending a few minutes just watching my breath, stepping away from conversations that drained my energy, and most importantly, building the habit of asking, is this worth losing my peace over? As I applied each Stoic principle to daily life, I didn't become emotionless or cold, as some might assume. On the contrary, I learned to love with boundaries, to forgive without being naive, to give without self-harm, and to hold on to calmness as a life-defining commitment. Because in the end, life doesn't necessarily get easier. I just became stronger and clearer in how I choose to respond to it. Thank you for staying until the very last seconds of this video. It tells me you're truly serious about building inner strength and living a life with intention. There will be times when everything feels overwhelming, when emotions rise and you just want to give up. But as long as you remain mindful, as long as you continue choosing response over reaction, you're on the right path. Be patient with yourself, because growth doesn't come from perfect moments. It comes from holding your ground in the middle of chaos. If you found this content helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss any future videos. I truly appreciate your presence here. I'll see you in the next one, where we'll continue strengthening the inner self, cultivating calm, and building a life of real depth.